All right, let's get started. So good afternoon, everyone, again, and thank you for joining us today virtually for the launch of our 2023 Hays Asia Salary Guide. My name is Olivia Bouteau, and I am a Senior Manager at Hays Japan. Today, I will be your host and moderator for this webinar. And in today's presentation, we would like to explain about the 2023 Hays Asia Salary Guide in detail. The Salary Guide launched very recently. So just a few words about myself. So as I mentioned just now, I'm a senior manager at Hays, and I have been in Asia working for over 10 years. In Hays Japan, it's been already over 8 years, and I currently manage 4 business units. So before I dive into the salary guide details, I would like to begin with a quick introduction to who we are and what we do. Some of you are already familiar with Hays Japan, some of you maybe not. So just for those of you who are not so familiar with Hays, we are one of the leading specialist recruitment companies globally, and we are a market leader in both the UK and Asia Pacific. We have over 11,000 staff worldwide across 255 offices in 33 markets. We recruit across 20 specialist industries, and for those of you on social media, we are the most followed most followed recruiting and staffing agency on LinkedIn, with currently over 6.2 million followers and counting. Regularly, we post industry news as well as tips and advice. So, of course, for those of you who are not following us on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so as well. So in Asia, we already have over 16 years of experience, and we are continuing to strengthen our position in 6 markets. Japan, obviously, where I'm making this webinar today, but also China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and since recently also Thailand. And for those of you who enjoy football, we are also the official recruitment partner of Manchester City Football Group, which has done quite well in the past few years for those who follow the Premier League in the UK. Now, talking about Japan specifically, in Japan, Hays is one of the largest foreign recruitment companies in the country, and we have 3 offices. So Tokyo office, our main office where I'm having the webinar from, but also Yokohama and Osaka. And in Hays Japan, our experts provide professional services across the private sector, primarily in permanent positions, but also contract roles, temporary assignments. We also provide services for recruitment process outsourcing, RPO solutions, and IT solutions across 13 specialisms. So you have the list here, but specialisms include accountancy and finance, banking and financial services, technology, marketing and digital, human resources, insurance, legal, life sciences, office professionals, property, sales, supply chain, and manufacturing. Now, once again, welcome everyone to today's webinar, and we're excited to share with you the key findings from this year's salary guide in Asia and Japan, including some specific points about recruitment trends, job seeker, employee priorities, and next actions and recommendations from us. To begin, we will provide a quick overview of what the salary guide is, followed by findings for Asia and then findings for Japan specifically. And finally, we will finish with recommendation for both employers and employees for this year 2023. We will conclude the webinar with a Q&A session. If we are unable to address all of your questions during the webinar, and if you're not comfortable sharing your questions on MS Teams, we can also follow up with you via email. Please note that this webinar will be recorded, and we will send you a link to the recording along with a soft copy to the 2023 salary guide after this webinar. Don't hesitate to ask any questions during the session. But once again, thank you for joining us, and let's get started. So first, regarding the report itself, we are proud to present this year is the 16th edition of the Salary Guide, and we gathered insights from more than 10,000 skilled professionals and hiring managers across China, Hong Kong, Japan, obviously, Malaysia, and Singapore to provide you with valuable information on the hiring trends and the job seeker priorities. Our report also includes industry-specific recruitment overviews from our experts, and a point that a lot of you may be interested in, salary benchmarks specifically for 2023. You can download the salary guide report using this QR code. If you haven't got the report yet, please scan the QR code and have a look at the report with the insights that I'm going to share with you from now on. So I'm just going to give you all a minute to download the report if you haven't had the chance to do so yet. Yes, I have a question. For those of you with questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll have the Q&A session at the end. So please bear with us. Again, if you have any issues downloading, we will, we're more than happy to get back to you on this later. All right, so let's move on now to start with our Asia findings. So for today, we're going to focus on 4 points about Asia findings. First, we're going to talk about strong desire to hire. Second, reality of salary change. Third will be top priorities for employees. And finally, we'll talk about future readiness. I'll explain in more detail what that means. If you think that it's a bit cryptic, I'll explain in more detail. So first, let's start by discussing strong hiring intentions across Asia. So we have compared data from 5 countries in Asia, and the graphs show interesting findings. So we have 2 graphs here. The graph on the left, displays the predicted and actual increase in permanent employees for 2022 and 2023. And the graph on the right shows the percentage of employers that utilize contingent employment, such as contract in 2022 and 2023. So on the left, permanent staff, and then on the right is contingent employment, such as contract hiring. So moving on to the projection of staff level increase, the survey results show an optimistic projection of staff level increase for 2023 across the region. And this is despite the pandemic in the last 3 years. Employers are planning to increase the permanent staff level over the next year. It has grown in terms of intention to hire to 53% this year. Compared to the previous years, it's quite a growth, especially compared to 2021 when it was only 36%, and last year was 52%. However, it's one thing to want to hire, but have employers been able to hire as planned? The employers who answered that the permanent staff increased over the last year are 39% for 2022 and 48% for 2023. So there is a 9-point increase compared to the last year. When we compare the projection of staff increase with the actual staff increase, we see a gap, however, between the ideal and reality. So while more than half of the employers expected to increase the number of permanent employees in 2022, only 48%, so a little bit less than half, were actually able to do so. Despite this, half of employers expect to increase the staff level, indicating that employers are still keen to hire in 2023 as well. In Japan, that's 58% of employers plan to increase the permanent staff level, which is the highest in the region. And in addition to permanent hire, 86% of employers expect to increase contingent recruitment to meet various needs. So again, contingent recruitment meaning contract staff or other types of recruitment which are non-permanent. And they are turning to contingent hiring to meet various needs, including enhancing the workforce or for project-based hiring. This indicates employers would increase both permanent recruitment and contingent recruitment. However, even though employers are highly motivated to hire, they are not able to meet their hiring needs completely. So while they are sometimes looking to hire permanently, they will move to increase their contract and temporary staff to meet the business needs. Now, let's discuss another interesting finding, which is the confidence to hire of organizations. When asked over the next 12 months, how confident are you that you will be able to recruit candidates with the skills needed to meet your organization's needs? 64% of organizations in Asia answer they are either very confident or confident. This across Asia marks a 5-point increase from the previous survey, where the result was 59%. China was the country with most confident organizations, standing at 71% confident they will be able to hire. Japan was the country with the least employers being confident about their hires, with only 44% quite confident to hire within the year. So the hiring intentions of organizations in Asia this year are a continuation of the trend of the past few years. Intention to hire remains stable. Organizations are increasing the number of employees and are becoming more confident in their ability to hire. However, for many years now, across the region, there has been much talk about organizations struggling with a shortage of talent. And even though there is a positive recruitment trend that we mentioned earlier, less than half of their organizations have actually increased their staff level compared to the previous year. This means that 1 in 2 organizations are still unable to hire as many people as they would like. Next, we're going to discuss a topic that I believe is on everyone's mind, and that is both for employers and employees. Are employers giving pay rise to employees? Every year, Hays asks employers whether they have given pay raise in the past year and whether they expect to do so in the next 12 months. So according to the latest survey for our salary guide, 78% of employers in Asia said they had increased salaries, and 80% said they expect to increase salaries in the next year as well. So this is a significant increase compared to only 59% in 2020, obviously year 1 of the pandemic, and 71% in 2021, which indicates that salary increases are becoming a trend across Asia. Now, if we look at the figures by region, Japan, Singapore, and Malaysia are almost the same, with 83% of employers implementing a pay rise. So next, we will examine some salary increase comparisons across Asia in greater detail. One interesting point is the potential correlation between inflation rates and salary increase, and the same for research and development expenditure. So on the left, the graph shows inflation rates and salary increases in various countries arranged in descending order of inflation rates. So the blue line represents inflation rates and the blue bars show the rate of salary increases. So what you can see on the graph is that China stands out as the only country with an outstandingly high rate of pay raise despite the lack of inflation. However, for the other 4 markets, you can see a potential correlation between higher inflation, which brings or is correlated to higher pay raises. On the other hand, Japan, where inflation was negative until 2021, pay raises were at their lowest, which is an unfavorable situation. The situation may change if you have followed the news. Inflation started to be positive from last year, 2022, with December 2022 being an all-time or 40-year high, with 40% increase on the inflation. So this potentially could mean that there will be a change in pay raise or could impact pay raises as well. We'll discuss more about salaries later. Now, having a look at the graph on the right, which shows R&D expenditure and unemployment rates in each country, what you see, the graph is arranged from left to right in descending order of R&D expenditure, and the blue bar graph shows so R&D expenditure, and the blue line shows the unemployment rate. From this graph, what we can see is that the higher the R&D expenditure, the lower the unemployment rate. So we could potentially connect the two and mention that investing more money in research and development can have a positive impact on employment. Now, moving on to the topic of employees' top priorities. Every year, we will ask employees about their intention to switch jobs. And this year, the percentage of respondents who answered yes to the question, "Are you actively looking for a new job?" has actually fallen gradually over the past 3 years since the pandemic. So in 2019, people who were actively looking for a job were 36% in 2019 and 31% in 2021. And finally, this year, the number who answered yes, as in they are actively looking for a role, is below 30% for this survey. In contrast, what we noticed is that the proportion of respondents who answered no has remained unchanged at an average of 20% over the past 3 years. So what has changed, however, is that we see an increase in the number of people who are not actively looking for a new job, but they are open to new opportunities. So what it means is that it's not necessarily that more people are not looking for a new job, but they are more cautious about switching jobs. So we see more people who are actually non-active, but cautiously open about new opportunities. Now, probably the most noteworthy finding from this year's survey is that salary became the top priority for both job seekers and employees staying within their current organization. Salary is number one criteria across all Asian markets, which is the first time in the past 7 years, including pre-pandemic years. So just to let you know, for those who are not aware or maybe did not know from our previous salary guides, but Japan has been an outlier in Asia, where traditionally seeking new challenges was the number one reason for job search. However, this year, salary has now taken the lead, which means that Japan is now aligning with other markets, which shows how much of a priority salary is for job seekers. However, compared to other markets, Japan still has some Japan specificities. New challenge is again this year in second position, even though it had been top priority for many years. And in third place, you have as a number 3 criteria for looking for a new position, lack of career progression is in third place. So we discussed about reasons why employees or job seekers are leaving their organization, but to talk about why employees are staying in their current organization, we looked at different criteria. And for the first time, salary has become the top reason as well for staying with current employers. And this is again across all Asian markets. So work-life balance and salary have been competing as top reasons in the past. This time, salary for the first time ranked first across the region, with the number of people citing it as a top reason to stay in their current organization rising from 54% to 61%. And according to the survey, 66% of employees in Asia received a pay rise in the past year, which is slightly lower than the 70% of employers who said they had implemented a pay rise, which may suggest that even when employees have received a pay rise, it may not have had such an impact as the employers think it had for the employees. So something to think about. Another point that was a key finding for this year across Asia is the importance of DNI and sustainability. So these two topics have increasingly become a top priority for workers. And DNI, for instance, is cited more and more as a reason, both when employees are thinking to switch jobs, but also when thinking of staying within their current organization. So this year, 21%, which means 1 in 5 workers in Asia, mentioned that DNI policies are a reason to stay with their current organization. So competition is becoming more intense to attract, to retain talent across the borders. Developing D&I policies could be a crucial point when it comes to attracting best candidates. Now, moving on to sustainability, our survey results reveal that 51% of employers have already implemented sustainability reporting. 54% have linked the business to sustainable development goals. So when asked the question to employees, how important is it to you for your employer to show and practice commitment to environmental sustainability, 94% of workers responded that it is important. So once again, the survey results showed that it is becoming more and more important to focus on D&I and sustainability in the workplace. Now, obviously, all of those findings were across Asia. All of you today might be interested in hearing about Japan more specifically, so we'll move on to discuss about the Japan-specific findings. So we'll focus on 4 points. Eager to hire but lower confidence. I'll explain in more detail what it means. We'll then move on to discuss about salary is key. And finally, we'll talk about next actions for employers and employees as well. So first, we'll focus on the Japanese market and analyze the trends for both employers and employees in 2022, starting with trends around employers. So looking at business activity, we intend to look whether employers are planning to accelerate their business in 2023 and how it connects to recruitment activity. And every year, what we do is we ask employers whether they expect their business activity to expand or to contract. When we ask employers over the next 12 months, how do you expect your organization's activity levels to change? 66% of employers in Japan said they expect an increase. This is slightly lower, however, than the 72% average rate along the 4 years before the pandemic, but it did recover from the 57% response rate in 2020, obviously the first year of the pandemic. It did decrease from 69% in 2021. So this slight decrease in response rate can be attributed to concerns. Obviously, we all know in terms of inflation, as I mentioned before, inflation has impacted Japan since last year. Also, there are other external factors and global context has changed. One obvious change was the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So the number of respondents who indicated that business activity would decrease, this number may have increased slightly due to the impact on business activity that became, to show in late 2022. We did see, for instance, a lot of organizations announcing the suspension or reduction of new hiring. We did see a fall as well in the US NASDAQ index as well, so this may have had an impact. Moving on to the responses to the question on business activity and related organizational movements, we found that just under 70% of respondents indicated an increase in business activity. However, we found out quite a high percentage, 63% of employers said they were restructuring their organizations or departments. This figure is actually comparable to China and significantly higher than other Asian countries. Just to give you a bit of perspective, so before the pandemic in 2018 and 2019, the percentage was also high at 70%, but it dropped to 60% in 2020, likely due to the pandemic. It remained at the same level in 2021, but has slightly increased to 63% in our current survey. So why restructuring? Top reasons given for employers to consider restructuring were changing skill set required, 55%, movement towards more flexible working, 32%, and digital transformation was another one that was quoted by 27%. So as we enter the third year of the pandemic, employers are still required to respond to digitalization and changing work environments, which may lead organizations to feel the need to restructure. Obviously, with the addition of the impact of inflation, recession, it may create renewed momentum for restructuring. But these findings indicate that even though business activity is expected to increase overall, organizations are at the same time taking actions and initiatives that require restructuring. It may mean that additional human resources will be needed if business activities increase or are being restructured. Now, moving on, let's talk about hiring trends in Japan. In Japan, 58% of employers stated that they plan to increase their staff levels over the next year, which is higher than the average of 53% in Asia and the highest across the region. So good news to everyone here in Japan. This trend has been increasing steadily over the past 2 years. The number was 39% in 2021, 59% in 2022, and this year 58%. So there is a growing willingness to hire following the pandemic. And also, this is potentially for permanent hiring, but there is also a positive outlook for contingency recruitment, with 87% of employers planning to increase their staff levels, which again is the highest across the region. So when asked about why? What are the top reasons to increase staff levels? Number one reason given is to meet peaks in demand at 46%. Also at 34% to ensure flexibility of staffing costs. And 32% of employers answered that they find it difficult to find suitable permanent workers in Japan. So this suggests that Japan has the highest willingness to hire across Asia, and that is both for permanent and contingency staff. So all of this is seeming very positive and obviously a positive outlook for the business. But then why are organizations experiencing skill shortages? So to answer this question, we asked respondents to identify the reasons behind their skill shortages. And 47% indicated that the skills needed for the position that they're hiring for were too niche and hard to source in the current market. 46% mentioned as well that higher compensation was being offered elsewhere. So this could suggest that employers are aware that it is challenging to find the talent and they feel that they could not offer competitive salaries. So a big something quite important to think about. Due to these challenges, 56% of respondents in Japan do not feel confident that they will be able to recruit candidates with the skills that they require to meet their organization's needs over the 12 months, which is again the highest percentage in Asia. So again, quite a Japan-specific topic. However, the average for respondents who felt confident in the other four markets was 64%, and in China reached 71%. So it shows employers are facing a difficult situation. They want to hire, but they are not confident in their ability to do so, even though they understand why. There are actually skill shortages in the market. Now, let's have a closer look at the issue of salaries. We just mentioned right now about the fact employers do not always feel that they are offering competitive packages. So when we asked employers about salary increases over the past year, 82% in Japan reported giving a pay rise, which is one of the highest rates in Asia. However, in terms of how much was this increase? Just over half, 52%, said that the increase was up to 3%. When we look at other countries, for instance, Singapore, 83% of employers gave a pay rise, with 52% of those employers offering a pay rise of 3% or more. So again, this is quite a significant difference in the rate of salary increases between the two countries. When we look at other countries, such as China, Malaysia, again, there was a large proportion of organizations offering pay rises from 3 to 6%. So all of those findings may suggest that Japan is not as competitive as other countries in the region when it comes to salary increases. So as much as we want to hire, hearing about the shortage of talent and how the salary increases are low compared to other markets may make us pessimistic. Yet, just to reassure everyone, there are bright sides for employers as well. In terms of salary, we mentioned before, 82% of employers in Japan have raised salaries in the past year, and 81% have also mentioned that they are planning on giving salary increases in the next year as well. So this is from the salary guide, but also from the MHLW, Ministry of Health. 81% of companies are planning to raise salaries in 2023, which is a positive response to the wage increases. So considering that the prediction for salary increase in the following year was only 62% in the first year of the pandemic, we can see this as a sign of returning to pre-pandemic levels and responding to salary increases as well, which is quite a positive sign for the market. Again, when talking about Ministry of Health Labor and Welfare Survey on wage revisions, the average wage revision rate has actually risen to 1.9%, which is the first increase in 5 years. And we are thinking that in 2023, there will be, again, salary increase rate as well. Predictions in the private sector is that the predicted average increase rate will be 2.85% this year. You might have seen in the news already a few companies have made it quite known that they are planning to increase salaries this year. Some of the names that made the news, you may have heard of Fast Retailing, Suntory, Nippon Life as well, have all announced salary increases for this year. Another positive aspect to think of is the change in work styles that companies have been working on during the pandemic and the effects this has had on employees. So a question that we ask is about full remote work. And in Japan, the number stands out actually with 16% of organizations offering full remote work compared to only 5% in average in the other 4 countries in the region. So Japan again is standing out, offering full remote option for 16% of the organization, and hybrid work in Japan reaches 75%, which is a drastic change when comparing before and after the pandemic. And something to think about is that flexible work styles were mentioned by 54% of employees thinking to stay in their current organization. So it shows that a lot of employees feel that they are currently able to work flexibly. So when we're thinking about those 2 points, salary increase and the fact that employers have adapted to the pandemic by changing their work styles, this is something that we recommend to keep moving forward. And it has potentially greatly contributed to employee retention. And I will discuss later that it can also be a successful impact on labor shortage as well. So far, we've summarized the trends of companies in Japan compared to other regions in Asia and based on previous data as well. For employers, the question now is how to promote recruitment to address the issue of labor shortage. What should they do to hire? What actions are necessary to find the right talents? So to find hints, we need to understand the psychology and trends of employees, which we will address in the next part. So when looking at, psychology of employees and the perspective of employees, right now, number 1 criteria for employees thinking of whether to change jobs or to stay within the current organization will be depending on the salary. So I think this is the number 1 keyword for today's salary. So as we discussed in the previous section, we saw that Japan holds the highest willingness among Asian organizations to hire, right? So there is obviously consensus organizations in Japan want to hire, but when looking at employees' intention to change jobs, what will determine professionals to search actively for a new position or not will be depending on the salary. So at the moment, we have 24% of employees or job seekers who are actively looking for a job, which is lower than other Asian countries. In pre-pandemic, it was only 19% in 2019. It did increase to 21% in 2020. So we see that the pandemic did not have such a significant impact on the statistic. It did increase to 23% in 2021, and now 24% of active job seekers. It did decrease from 36% in 2019, and in the present day, we had 41% in 2020 and now 35% in 2021. So not necessarily many active job seekers, but when we look at a different perspective on the data, there is an increase in the number of respondents of people who are not actively looking for a new job, but who would consider it if the right opportunity came along. So we sometimes call it passive job seekers. So this percentage increased from 38% in 2020 to 42% in 2021, and now 50% in the 3rd year of the pandemic. So what it means is that the recruitment market definitely is not in a pessimistic state. But the main question that comes from this is what would then motivate professionals to look for a new job opportunity? What would make professionals become active job seekers? From an employer standpoint, this is a crucial question to answer, to know and encourage and attract talented individuals who are potentially open to new job opportunities and turn them into active job seekers. So in the previous section, we discussed Japan's recruitment market and how it has been affected by the pandemic. Now we'll be looking in more detail about the reasons why professionals in Japan are looking for a new job. And this year has seen quite significant change. As we saw earlier, salary is now the top factor across all markets, including Japan. However, in the past 5 years, seeking new challenges and lack of career progression had been in the top 3 alongside better salary. This year, however, so for the first time after many years in the first place, new challenges, which used to be in top spots, has been taken over by salary, which is the #1 reason why employees are looking for a new role. Even more surprising is the number of respondents and the magnitude of this shift. Now we have 71% of respondents who mentioned better salary as their primary reason for looking for a new position, whereas for new challenges and lack of career progression, they ranked second and third, but with only 39% and 34% mentioning those two reasons as their priority as to why they are changing roles. So this shows a significant increase, nearly 20 points from the previous survey, which again shows how important salary has become for professionals in Japan. And definitely this change is specific to this year compared to the previous years. So from an employer's perspective, understanding the fact that priorities have changed is definitely crucial to attract and retain top talents. So let's move on to the reasons why employees are choosing to stay with their current employers. So as we mentioned before, Japan has the highest, as a higher percentage of professionals who are not actively seeking a job. And why are they deciding to stay with their current employers? So again, for the first time along other markets in Asia, salary is now #1 reason why professionals are choosing to stay with their current with their current employers. It's actually ranked second with 59% of respondents, and #2 was flexible working options as another reason why employees are choosing to stay with their current employers. And third criteria is work-life balance. So what it shows is flexible working environment is becoming a really key point to take into account for employers. And it is quite interesting to see that top 3 reasons for looking for a new position have remained consistent. However, we mentioned about salary now becoming #1, but the reasons for staying with the current employer actually have changed over the same period. So quite a change there to take into account as to why employees are choosing to stay and how to retain the workforce when you're thinking from an employer standpoint. So moving on to the possible reason, definitely increase in salaries. 80% of employers have implemented or plan to implement salary increase, which could explain why workers are staying with their current employers. If you have given your employees a salary raise, they are more potentially keen on staying with the organization. But there seems to be a disconnect between employers and employees. 62% employees reported receiving a pay raise. However, the number of employers who mentioned about giving a pay rise was higher, so there is a bit of a gap here. And when we look at expectations from employee perspective, 29% of employees said they do not anticipate a change in their salary this year, compared to an average of 12% in the other 4 markets. So what it means is that Employees may be less optimistic about salary increase than their employers, with an average in Japan being fewer than in other markets. This may be a consequence of news about inflation, about the price of food and other aspects of life having increased in the recent months. So it may be something to consider for employers to take into account and definitely have salary as an important factor in to retain current employees. Another important factor is definitely flexible working options and work-life balance. They have become key priorities for employees when they are choosing as to why they are staying in the current organization. Before pandemic, it was not even in the top 5, but obviously post-pandemic, they became number 2 reason as to why employees are deciding to stay in their current organization, just behind salary, which is a big increase, 1.5 time increase from 38% in the previous survey, and more than a 2-fold increase compared to pre-pandemic times. So obviously a direct consequence of the pandemic. When you think, pre-pandemic times, it was the norm to come to work at a set time from 9 to 6, and every employee would accept the situation. But now, post-pandemic, work-life balance, flexible working options have become quite indispensable as a reason to stay with the current employers. So something to consider as well in terms of retention is definitely offering those flexible work flexible work options. What we will explore moving forward are actions employers and workers should take in response to these changes. What can employers do to recruit and retain staff? We will consider all of those options separately. So next step for employers, definitely we are noticing a skill shortage and lack confidence in their hiring ability that we mentioned before. To address this challenge, employers can look at the reasons why professionals change jobs and why they choose to stay with their current employers. So definitely flexible working arrangements, work-life balance as the second and third most common reasons why professionals choose to stay with their current employers are key for employers to, not only attract employees, but also to retain them. It's interesting to see that they are cited as second and third most important factors for professionals staying with their current employers. However, they are not among the top reasons considered when changing jobs. In fact, lack of flexible working arrangement and poor work-life balance are only ranked 10th and 8th out of 14 reasons when job seekers are looking for a new position. Top 3 reasons for changing jobs are still salary, new challenges, and career progression, which have remained the same for more than 5 years. So quite a disconnect there between people choosing to stay and people when they have decided to change roles. So definitely recommendations for employers, for organizations, they would need to offer good pay, flexible working arrangements, good work-life balance, but also take into account new challenges and career progression. It may seem like a big task, definitely a lot of things to take into account for employers, but it is becoming a global standard and employers should work toward this goal. It is not enough to offer just a good working environment. You also want to make sure that employers provide employees with career advancement to prevent turnover. So definitely employers should ask themselves whether their employees' perceptions align with the organization's response. There's a need for skills development, as we just mentioned before. Hayes actually launched a learning mindset report, which was published globally in September last year, which found that workers are highly motivated to learn, which is a good thing. But from the employer's perspective, only half of the employers believe that their employees are very willing to learn new skills, which shows a gap that probably would need to be addressed. There's also a need for employers to understand, what do employees want to learn? Are employers meeting those needs? Definitely important to look deeper into these issues. And when asked about important training topics, employees mentioned they're keen to learn hard technical skills as well as management management and leadership. For employers, however, when they're asked about which important skills are required to hire, employers will cite technical skills and language skills, and communication skills, problem solving skills for soft skills. So both sides, employers and employees, value technical skills, which could benefit from training opportunities. Also, for employers, it might be good to look into management and language training, which would bridge the gaps between the employees and employers' need and might make a difference when it comes to retention. For employees, this section summarizes how workers should approach their career planning. And we definitely, with the survey, saw that a lot of criteria are taken into account when you are planning a career and looking for a new job. This could include salary, benefits, training, company values, culture, flexible working arrangements, work-life balance, work opportunity, and potential for career growth. But what are your top priorities when looking for a new job is also quite important. For some, salary will definitely be the priority, something we've discussed already. For others, it may be work-life balance, which is more important as long as the salary meets certain minimum expectations, right? So definitely, when you are looking for a new position, Hayes is a recruitment agency that will be able to support. We definitely have the professionals and years of experience to support your need, but you might need information on how to plan your career and understand your skill set and how your skill set values for organizations. So it is crucial to determine your own top priorities, but also your skill set and how it would match the employer's needs as well. So the clearer you are on your priorities, the easier it will be for us to give career advice. And of course, we're here to provide with this advice. But it would be important as well to keep up to date with the skills required in your area. And to make sure that you are catching up with what is required in the market as well, to make sure that the career planning can be successful as well. Now, moving on to the final part of our salary guide, recommendations for employers and employees. I'm just being mindful of time, so I'll just give the key points as well. So key recommendations for employers for this year, definitely we've talked about salary, so make sure to reward employees fairly. It's probably one of the key messages for this year. Salary is significant. It's a significant motivator for professionals and definitely a reason behind talent shortages. So make sure to reevaluate your remuneration system, take into account external factors, including inflation, as it has a huge impact on retaining your employees and attracting employees as well. Another point to have in mind is a strong EVP, employee value proposition, both for talent acquisition and employee retention. So this means understanding societal challenges, what opportunities can you offer to your employees, and making sure to incorporate them and connect them to your own business objectives. Obviously, we discussed DNI, sustainability are key focuses to have in mind for the future. Final point as a recommendation is to make sure to reshape the workplace experience. We've talked about this. Employees value flexible working style and work-life balance. However, some organizations offer more limited remote working, will ask employees to come to the office. We understand that it has an impact on productivity, potentially on organizational culture, but do have a look at how it impacts in terms of attracting and retaining talent. It might be important for your organization to reimagine the work experience to offer more flexibility and support employees' work-life balance while keeping a strong organizational culture. For employees, work out what is most important to you. As we've seen, different individuals value different things, whether it's salary, flexible working, work-life balance. It's important for you to determine what matters the most. But when you look at a long-term career path, you will also need to take into account the long view, which means you will need to focus on skill development, making sure to continuously build your skill set, expand your skill set set to also expand your career options. We've seen the impact of DX. Let's not even talk about AI. I think everyone knows about how AI can have an impact. All of those skills, adding skills to your skill set will impact your career development as well. So it might be good to work backwards and identify which skills are necessary to attain your career goals, to have a clearer idea as well as to your next career step. What are the challenges you are facing and how to overcome them as well. And last but not least, obviously, work is one thing, but what kind of work is meaningful for you? So definitely make sure to find your purpose. What kind of impact do you want to have through your work? It is important to know yourself, to make sure that you find organizations that resonate with your values, and obviously positions that would contribute to your purpose as well. All right, so this summarizes our key findings for this year's salary guide. We'll be moving on to the Q&A session. I do realize we're a little bit over time, so if you want to ask your questions in the chat, I will do my best to answer them on the spot. If we run out of time, obviously we can also follow up by email later, or we can ask our experts to follow up later if we don't have enough time to answer all questions. Again, if you want to ask a specific question, now is the time to do so in the Teams chat. So I have a question about flexible work environment. So I can't say for all organizations. The question is about hybrid work environment. How many days in a week is average? So we do not have the data for all organizations, but as a trend and what we see for most organizations that we work with, and we do see a lot of organizations now offering hybrid work style. I would say in average, organizations would do 2 days per week in the office or 3 days per week in the office, depending on organization. This is the most common work style we have seen post-pandemic, is 2 to 3 work days in the office or work from home. I have another question on the survey results and how many answered. So for Japan specifically, we have over 3,000 respondents. I have another question, but I'm not sure what the question means up to the role. So I'm not sure if you could be a little bit more specific about the question. Right. I'll move on to the other question as I wasn't sure about the previous one. So I have a question on how many of the responding companies were large corporations, how many were smaller startups. We don't have necessarily the specific in terms of how many people are within the organization. So it would include both startups as well as large organizations for this salary guide. It's a mix, yeah. I see. I see. So Natsumori-san was asking about the hybrid work style. Yes, there are positions which require to come to the office. So it does depend on the position. But again, it is something to look into with employees as well. And for specific industry-specific differences, again, the data and what we looked at for Japan was holistic. So it was across all different industries. Now, if you want more industry-specific answers, my advice would be to ask, depending on which industry you're interested in getting to know about, and ask those professionals specifically from an industry perspective. But again, talking about the salary guide and the answers that we have, they are across all industries for Japan. There is a question on gender equality in terms of salaries. Definitely, there are discrepancies in Japan. There's also a lot to talk about in terms of differences in positions. Japan stands out. In the world as one of the countries with the lowest percentage of women in leadership position, just from latest reports from I think was the World Gender Index. Japan only had 14% of women in leadership positions. So definitely this would impact as well in terms of in terms of salaries. However, for same position, we haven't had the specific, we don't have the specific data on how much of a discrepancy there is for same position, same title. I have a question on why Japan is behind on salary packages compared to other areas in the region. So I think we briefly mentioned it during this seminar. One of the key reasons why Japan would be behind is definitely the fact that for many years Japan was actually on a negative inflation rate. So in terms of inflation, the increase of the cost of life and so on was lower than other countries. So other countries tended to match and compensate with salary increases, which was not the case for Japan. However, as we mentioned as well, because inflation rates are increasing from this year, we do expect that salary might increase at a higher rate this year compared to the previous years pre-pandemic. Yes, so we only have 3 minutes left, and I apologize for anyone for which I haven't answered the question to. So what we will do is obviously we will get back to you individually for the ones who have asked questions and would need a more specific answer. I apologize for the sake of time. We will move on to our very final section. So for those of you who want to ask more questions, you can also find me on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to answer later by email, phone, or also ask our professionals to get back. But just to finish this webinar, just to mention that obviously the salary guide is one of our publications, but every year Hays Japan and Hays does produce other publications. We briefly mentioned about the learning mindset report, about skill set and the different skills required for employers and employees. We do also produce reports on Asia diversity and inclusion, DNA of a CFO, different press releases as well. So do check our other publications. And obviously, we were very happy to conduct this webinar today. So for all of those who would want to follow us, please see our QR codes. So those are the QR codes for our LinkedIn and our own website. Again, if you need the QR code to our salary guide, we can provide it later as well. Do stay connected with us. We'd be very happy to have you as part of our growing network. So do not hesitate to follow us as well. And again, don't forget to scan the QR codes if you need more information about Hays or about the reports and publications that we provide. More than happy to share more information on this. All right, 2:59. It concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I was really pleased to be hosting this session. As I mentioned, if you need more information, you can connect with me as well. And I thank you all for your time, and I wish you a really nice rest of your day. Thank you very much.